from a teenage entrepreneur to building the business and life of his dreams.
I put about 40 minutes of time to record a video and write a blog post back in 2014, sharing my views on a piece of software. And that one blog post has made me $840,000 in true passive income.
Carl Taylor's wealth creation strategy has taken some interesting twists and turns.
You know, shock horror, actually crypto.
Really?
I checked it just before this. Over the last 14 years, that's how long I've been in crypto, I've made 5,392% return. That's roughly 385% return a year, right? Like, so From a financial percentage return, that has been my absolute best investment. Now, do I recommend it? I'm not saying I recommend crypto necessarily. I'm just sharing that that's the reality of the numbers.
You're the first person on this program to say crypto, so you're a world breaker there.
Carl's also on a mission to help other business dads achieve work-life balance.
So we help them build a business that doesn't rely on them, step out of the day-to-day through automation, team, etc., smart ways of working. But not just that, you're surrounded by just other dads who are in business.
It's a jam-packed episode of 10 with Ty.
Hi, I'm Tyron Hyde, the CEO of Washington Brown, the property depreciation experts. Now, I'm a qualified quantity surveyor and also a best-selling author who's helped hundreds of thousands of property investors over the years pay less tax through depreciation. I'm also an avid investor, which is why I created the podcast series 10 with Ty, where I ask the smartest people I know the same 10 questions to unlock the keys to their success and hopefully leave a playbook for my family and your family too about investing. Now, this podcast is general in nature and not specific to your financial circumstances. We always recommend you sit down with an accountant or financial planner before making any investment decisions. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hello and welcome to 10 with Ty. You know, when I started this podcast, I wanted experts from 3 different fields. I wanted property gurus because, that's my shtick. I wanted share experts because that's my second love of investing. But I also wanted entrepreneurs because building a successful business is a surefire way to wealth creation. And that's where my next guest comes in. His name's Carl Taylor. He's an IT guru, a business coach, and he owns a digital marketing company called Automation Agency. But what I like about Carl, he's also very passionate about helping dads build the business and life of their dreams. Carl, welcome to 10 with Ty.
Great to be here. Happy to jump in.
Cool. So, Carl, let's go back in time, back to young Carl and starting your entrepreneurial journey. Were you a lemonade stand kind of guy, or were you selling Star Wars memorabilia?
Well, my first official business, like with an actual registered ABN, was at 15 years old. So I didn't necessarily have unofficial businesses, but I did have probably similar entrepreneurial ideas. Like, I taught myself to code at 10. I was building software. I was going down a path of being like a hacker and I was going down a not great path. And thankfully, I don't even know what redirected me. It might have been my parents who were a bit concerned, but it kind of redirected me and I started to focus more on business. But I always wanted to be an inventor as a kid. I had access to broadband, cable, high-speed internet in 1998, long before most kids did, right? And so I was downloading movies and I had saved up to buy a DVD burner cost me like $500 to get a 4-speed DVD burner. And so I would download movies and I would burn them on DVDs and I didn't sell them, but I would do disc swapping. A long, long time ago, there was actually a forum online in Australia where people like me, you would put up a list, like a spreadsheet of here's all the movies I have, here's all the movies they have. And you would look at your list and go, I want that. Can you find 4 things on my list? And then you'd post them through the mail to each other before you could download stuff. And you'd send these burnt DVDs to each other. So I had things like that I did, but I never really got into the entrepreneurial side until I just officially started doing it at 15. I was going to be an online costume shop. This is before live transactions were being done online. I was too early. I was very early and I wanted to sell costumes. I wanted to eventually become like a Lucasfilm Lights and Arts kind of studio eventually is what I wanted. But I started with just costumes and things that I was going to sell online. I built my own website. I did a business plan in my business studies class at school about my actual business. I had a registered ABN, but no one wanted to buy those things. It turned into a web design business, which was my first official business building websites for people at 15. So.
Well, that's come full circle, hasn't it, now with automation agency?
It has in many ways. It has. Yeah.
Do you want to explain to the audience what and disclaimer, I've started using automation agency and it's fantastic. Bit of a plug there for you, but it's great. Do you want to tell the audience what automation agency is and how it works?
Yeah, automation agency, basically, we are the marketing team that you don't need to hire and train. We are the execution team. So if you've got the ideas of what you want to do and you're like, I need to build that landing page, I need these graphics done, I need a video edited, I want to create content, I want to build this automation inside of my automation tools. And if you're like, what automation tools? We actually can provide an automation tool. It's called Automate OS as well. We've got our own system we can give people. But like it basically eliminating that issue for solopreneurs and marketing teams and marketing agencies where they're like, how do I build a team that I can maybe afford? Like solopreneurs often can't afford much. So it's like, pay us a flat monthly fee, you get unlimited access to our team. And agencies, how do you have something that can scale up and down? Some months you're busy, some months you're not. So you can scale up how much you use our team. And soon, hopefully in about a month from, I don't know when this goes live, but a month from recording, we'll also have AI agents as well as our human agents that can do some of the work as well.
Okay. All right. We'll get to AI later. I just want to circle back, right, to because you've got Dad. I want to circle back to the entrepreneurial side of your life. You've also got your focus now seems to be on Dadpreneurs. Do you want to explain you've got a podcast called Dadpreneurs? Do you want to let the audience know what Dadpreneurs are and how do you help dads?
We help dads who are established business owners who are struggling with the idea of work-life balance, right? They built the business, they got the money, but maybe what we find is that either their relationships are really struggling because they've focused on work. Could be a relationship with your wife, could be a relationship with the kids. And ultimately, the business has sucked up too much of their life. And they're going, how do I step out of these operations? How do I actually get more freedom to connect with my family? Usually the people who come to us have had a realization, or they always knew all along, that family is actually the most important thing. The relationships is the most important part of life, and they've let business get in the way. So we help them build a business that doesn't rely on them, step out of the day-to-day through automation, team, etc., smart ways of working. But not just that, you're surrounded by just other dads who are in business. Because let's just be honest, when you're a dad in business, you approach business differently. You just do. You've got different decisions with different impacts versus if you're a single guy or you're even a double income, no kids kind of family. It's just different decisions, different constraints. And when you can be around other dads, like our last call, we spoke with one dad about his kids being bullied. How would we handle that? So we covered a whole bunch of business topics, and then we spent the next part of the call going like, here's how we would advise you to try and help your son who's being bullied at school.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the practical things that dads can do to, build a business of their dreams and not lose their partners and kids along the way?
One of the first things that we get people to do is design their ideal week, right? Like I think it's really important that we build the constraints. Like the bottom line, like if I was to give you the 30-second, how do you actually build a business that works without you? You make the decision and you back it up. There's more nuance and there's strategies to do that. But really one of the biggest things is if you can make the shift from I'm a business operator, I'm the technician who does these things, I have to show up, to actually like I'm the owner of a business, and the owner of the business does not deal with this customer, it does not do these things. And then you make the decision that that's what's happening. And then you set up the constraints. And some of those constraints are, okay, you're going to be home at 4 p.m. every day. You're going to switch off and you're going to go and be with your kids. Or you're going to do a date night. Or for me, like I take Fridays off. Like even this week, the number of people who have reached out to me, a partnership with this other company, and they're like, oh, can you meet on Friday? And I've had to say to him 3 times now, I don't work Fridays. Fridays is family day, because he can't remember. It's just like Fridays is family day. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
But it's building those constraints, and that's different for, I've had clients, for them, their constraint is they work from 8 a.m. till 1 p.m. every day, and then they finish work. That's their day. For me, I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, different things for those different days, and then Friday's completely off. Friday, Saturday, Sunday is completely off. And I've got different hours that I constrain to, but putting those constraints in place and then putting family in first. So often we put business first, and then I'll get to family. But it's like, no, let's get your time with your kids. Let's put the holidays you're going to go away with. Let's, have a dad venture with your kids. Let's have date nights with your partner. Put all that in the calendar, put in your personal training and your workouts, the time for you as well. Then put work around that. There's so many things you can do, but like that's one of the biggest things that could make a huge shift for anyone.
Yeah, my wife and I recently did that with Dale Bowman on Plan Your Life Day, and it was first put in date nights and block out holidays first. So prioritize that against the work, and then let the work around that. I love that. What about the financial side? You interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs. I've looked at some businesses in my life, and to buy, and they've said, my business earns $500,000 profit per year, and I go through it and wait a minute, you're not paying yourself. So if I look at that business, they try to tell me it's worth 500,000 times three times earnings, worth 1.5. So, well, no, because I'd want to put someone in there for $250,000 to run it. So really, it's only $250,000 times three. It's worth half what you think it is. Do you see that? Do you see people struggling to not pay themselves and not focusing on that side of it, and just putting all their money in and thinking, I've got this successful business? Is that a problem that you see from these dadpreneurs?
Yeah, 100%. Like, there's many business owners, especially earlier stage business owners and when I say early stage, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're only been in business 3 years. It just means where the business is up to. You could have been doing the same thing for 10 years straight, and you don't have 10 years of experience in business. You've got maybe 2 years of business experience. And you've just repeated that multiple times to get to 10 years of business. But like by early stage, like, you're in still the cash, trying to figure out cash flow. Maybe you're still trying to figure out product market fit. And so many of those people, and I was one of those guys, like I ran businesses for years that didn't take any money. And then eventually when I started paying myself even $200 a week, it was like, well, this is amazing, but not enough to live on. So paying yourself first is one of the big principles at Dadpreneur as well, is like, you've got to pay yourself as the CEO immediately. And if that means the business is no longer profitable, that's okay. You just now need to go, how do we fix this business model to be viable? Or maybe there's something wrong with the business. But to your point around the valuation of the company, I actually, I was a licensed business broker for a while. Like, if I was going to sell the business, I would take what I take as my pay out of the business, and I'd put that back in. Like, if I was selling the business, I would value it based on owners' drawings. But a smart buyer would definitely come back in and say, well, hold on a second. I'm not going to run this business myself. I'm not buying myself a job. But for many smaller businesses, they're selling a job. And if they're selling a job, well, that's what you're selling. You're selling the income potential. But for smart people like you and I, we would come in and go, well, hold on, I'd have to employ someone at $100,000 a year. So actually it's only got 20 grand profit. So I'm going to value it on that.
100 grand a year. I think baristas get more than that now, Carl.
Well, obviously it depends on the business that we're talking about selling.
You haven't employed anyone in Australia lately. They're all in the Philippines, I suspect.
They are, yes.
Speaking of that, one thing that does fascinate me, right? So I know I've seen you've said you work 1 hour a week on the business on automation agency, which is the goal, right? How? Like, I've got some staff in the Philippines, and how do you get that level of trustworthy staff that can actually be managerial in the Philippines? Like, it's an amazing business you've managed to do that. Has there been a lot of trial and error? I reckon there has been, to get to that high level kind of managerial that you've managed to do.
Yeah, so automation agency's been around now for over 10 years. I know we celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year. I couldn't tell you the exact month. I've already forgotten. But so we might be coming up to 11 years now. I don't know. But probably about 5 or 6 years in, I made a hire that's turned out to be one of the best hires I ever made. I hired someone to come in as my recruiter, HR. I got to the point of, like, I'd been hiring so many Filipinos. I was like, this is taking too much time. I also, it's hard when the person's saying, like, oh, my grandmother died, or this happened, and all these potential excuses, and I'm not, or this typhoon's happened, and I'm not on the ground to verify or know if they're BSing me. And so I needed someone on the ground who could handle that. And I originally hired this girl part-time. She already had another full-time job. She took mine on part-time. And very quickly, she saw the potential in what we were doing and the growth. She actually quit her full-time job and came full-time with me. And she now is our head of operations. She runs the whole thing. And she is probably the person I most trust, and has been that secret hire. Like, I would love to say that I could give you the system to finding her, but there was a certain amount of luck that just made that work. And then from there, we were able to build up stronger leadership. Like, we had leadership roles and things, but over time, building her up into the role that she's now in has really allowed for that stepping back. Yeah. And I want to clarify too, like, right now, as of recording, I'm spending more than an hour a week in automation agency, but there was probably about 3 years of time that I was just doing an hour a week on automation agency. There's a lot of changes that have happened in our marketplace, AI, of various reasons. We had 6 months of our worst we've ever had in 10 years last year. And so that's brought me back in and, got me excited, and we're working on some really cool projects. So I'm spending more time on it because I'm driving it to a new level. But I just want to set that straight. But it's definitely possible.
Well, whatever you're doing is working, if you ask me. I know what you mean about having someone trustworthy on the ground. Sometimes I get an invoice or a letter from my company that I use, and I was like, you have sudden public holiday for the reminiscing on the third largest volcano eruption. I was like, really? I don't know.
They like their public holidays over there.
So do we. One final question before we get into 10 Week Tie. Now, you spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs and from Dadpreneurs. My question is, in your opinion, are entrepreneurs born or can they be made?
This is interesting. I believe they are made. However, I believe that most entrepreneurs are made. And I think one of the reasons there's such a prevalence of entrepreneurs in society today is because there's a lot of childhood trauma happening. I believe that most entrepreneurs are sent down that path due to trauma. And I'm talking trauma with little t. Like if you're familiar with trauma work, there's big T trauma, which is like, rape and accidents and all these terrible things. And then there's little t trauma, which happens consistently in all our lives. And we're all traumatized with little t trauma to some extent. And so I believe that if I look at myself and most entrepreneurs I've talked to, if you dig deep enough, you talk about their childhood, there was some form of adversity. There was, their parents weren't making a lot of money. And so it was that lack of money that drove them to want to, or they were bullied as kids. So I was bullied. We didn't have a lot of money. I wanted to become successful and wealthy. I got obsessed with reading wealth books because I wanted the power and I wanted the adoration from women who rejected me as a child, as a teenager. And like, that's what sent me down that path of I wanted to feel important. And so I think that entrepreneurship is a path of people moving down a path due to trying to have more control of a really uncontrollable environment. I think it's an amazing thing. I don't think they're necessarily born. And then I'll loop back to another thing you said. I used to believe that anyone and everyone could be a successful entrepreneur. Very early in my career, I used to kind of say that, like everyone can be an entrepreneur. I no longer believe that. I believe it's worth everyone who wants to give it a go to see if it's for them. But I think for certain people, for other versions of trauma, it's too risky for them. Like if they don't have that ability to feel to lean into the risk, and they care more about security and safety, they're going to struggle as an entrepreneur because let's be honest, being an entrepreneur is filled with risk. I think I see it not as risky, but like for many people, it's quite risky because of the uncertainty. They don't feel safe, and their nervous systems like safety. Whereas if you've gone through a lot of adversity as a child, you're more comfortable with adversity because you've lived through it as a kid. So anyways, that's a long answer to your question, but I believe they are made.
Amazing. I hope that kid or those kids that bullied you, Carl, have seen you on stage and you've gone, so you said, stuff you, look at where I'm at. Because
I don't say, that's the thing. I don't care about that now. I was caught up in my ego, but that was the thing. I was like, there was one distinct time in school. This kid had like it was metal work. He had this metalwork protractor thing, millimeters from my eye. And if someone had pushed me, I wouldn't have one of my eyes. And I left that class. I remember picking up my bag outside the class when the bell rang. And I remember muttering under my breath, like, I will own you one day. Like I'll be so wealthy that I'll be like Australia's Bill Gates. That's what was one of my goals. And that this kid would work for me one day. And like, that was one of my driving forces when I was younger.
Yeah. No, well done. All right. Let's move on to the 10 with Ty world famous questions. You ready to play?
I'm ready. All right.
Well, I've got to press my little buzz. Oh, no, wrong one. What has been your best investment?
Well, I'm sure you've heard this probably from a majority of your guests, but I would say education into mentors, books, coaching programs, events. It's been the single best investment I've done, not just because of the knowledge, but because of the relationships. Like you and me, we met at an event, a business event, our relationship. Some of my closest friends are people that I met through these events. Some of my early clients, my business automation agency was born by going to events, both as a speaker and a guest, hearing from the problems these business owners had that helped me come up with the idea of automation agency, right? So like, to me, it's one of the best investments you can make, especially if you can get around other people. But to give you something more tangible, because I'm sure you've heard that answer from most people, right? I would say there's two big investments that have really paid off for me. One time investment. I put about 40 minutes of time to record a video and write a blog post back in 2014, sharing my views on a piece of software. And that one blog post has made me $840,000 in true passive income. True passive income, meaning I wrote the blog post, I haven't had to do anything. I just earned that money. And I continue to date to earn thousands of dollars every month from that one blog post.
Coming back to that in a second. Keep going.
So from a time investment, that has got to be one of the best things I ever did. And there were so many things that went into factor to make that possible. Like it was just perfect timing. It was a perfect storm. It was back in 2014. It was the Tool Active campaign. And it just, people were, and it was a thing of people were asking me this question, what do you think of Active Campaign? I was finding a way to save myself time of having the same conversation over and over again. So I wrote a blog post and it had affiliate links in it. And that's how I ultimately have made this money.
Right.
From a financial investment, I would say, shock horror, actually crypto.
Really?
I checked it just before this. Over the last 14 years, that's how long I've been in crypto, I've made 5,392% return. That's roughly 385% return a year, right? Like, so from a financial percentage return, that has been my absolute best investment. Now, do I recommend it? I'm not saying I recommend crypto necessarily. I'm just sharing that that's the reality of the numbers.
You're the first person on this program to say crypto, so you're a world breaker there. The 840K. So what? It's just, tell me, this is a blog with affiliate links, and you're just getting little clips everywhere. Is that how it works?
Well, and you know what's crazy thing here is I actually haven't had a new person sign up through that affiliate link since 2020. So over 5 years ago. But this is the thing. It was a recurring commission. So it's a recurring commission. So as long as people continue to use the software, I've been earning money. So it's like a trail commission effectively. And it was just the right timing. Like there was a perfect storm. I had built some relationships with the CEO of that company just through email. Actually, I just sent some emails back and forth and we'd built a relationship. So when I wrote the blog post, I told him and he left a comment. And then internally, I only found this out maybe 6 years ago now. Their company themselves, their salespeople were sending people to my blog post to help get their sales over the line. So it was just this perfect storm of like, no one was really using Active Campaign back then. Like now, if you search Active Campaign reviews, like my blog post doesn't even show because people who know SEO better than me have like taken over. But that was just the right time, the right perfect storm.
Brilliant.
And I've been able to continue to earn from that. It was 40 minutes of my time to record a video. And then before ChatGPT, it would have taken less time with ChatGPT. I was then able to take that video and I just did a quick bullet point blog post below it. And over time, I've improved it. And I've tried to replicate that with other offers and I've not made the same amount of money, but I still make decent money. So yeah.
Fantastic. On hourly rate, that's pretty good. 40 minutes, 840K. Just circling back, just one final thing before the next question. So I agree with you in terms of networking, education. You know that I'm part of a business blueprint group and I've been there for 12 years now. Why do you still go? Well, firstly, because things change so much, right? Now, Dale Beaumont, who runs it, giving talks on AI every fortnight or so. But the other thing is networking. So I might pay, say, $10,000 per year, but I get about $500,000 in referral fees per annum by people that are in the program, right? So in terms of an ROI there, no brainer for me.
Do you own an investment property? Washington Brown has helped over 250,000 property investors pay less tax with the depreciation schedule. Visit washingtonbrown.com.au to pay less tax today.
Question number 2, Carl. What's been your worst investment? You can't say crypto.
No, definitely not. And it's interesting, like this was a tough one to think about, really. Like I think thinking about this question is a tough one because like, I don't know if this is my worst because there's been marketing campaigns that I've run that bombed. There are products that I've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars building. Like there are businesses that I built and invested money in that I never launched. Like there was a software product that I spent a lot of money building that I just gave up on eventually and said, this is, sunk cost fallacy, just forget it and I'll move on. So those, were financially quite big costs. But if the thing that comes to mind is 2 years ago, I invested $100,000 into buying an e-commerce business and I did it with a bunch of other investors. And it was also in conjunction with a specialist e-commerce management team. So it was supposed to be really hands-off for me. Like they did the acquisition, they did the negotiations, they did everything. I was just basically part of the bank investors. And due diligence was clearly not done properly by their legal team. And I was too trusting of the experience of these management. And so they acquired the particular company we acquired. Turns out it had a whole bunch of legal issues. They didn't actually own the rights of the name of the product that we're doing. So as things started to scale up, then we found out that there was actually a cease and desist letter sent. And so this thing turned into an absolute mess, both operationally, but then also the other investors who had gone in this deal with me didn't live up to their contractual obligations, where they were also supposed to provide a line of credit as well as their initial investment. And I was one of the only people that actually provided the line of credit. And so now I was the line of credit for the whole business where all the other investors hadn't. And so then we were running out of cash because they didn't have all the other investors' line of credit as well. So it became a real mess. And so the lesson there for me was probably being too trusting of just these guys know what they're doing. And I should have asked a bit more questions, because my background is I used to teach people about buying and selling businesses. I was a licensed business broker at one point. Like, I should have lent more on my expertise instead of just assuming they knew what they were doing. Now, the good news is that the book on this deal is not fully closed. The guy who runs the management team has been very honorable. And so there's some things still happening that I might see my money back. I might even get a return on my money. But the big problem has been, for the last 2 years, there was opportunity cost. I could have done so many other things with that $100,000, right? Like, take crypto as an example. I'd put that $100,000 into crypto, and I would have made 382%. Like, not necessarily, but you know what I mean? Like, there's an opportunity cost, and so when a deal does go wrong, no matter what, it hurts. So it's an expensive lesson in buying businesses that you don't actively manage.
And you're still buying crypto out of curiosity, or you've got enough?
No, at the moment, I'm just a buy and hold. I'm just a hold guy at the moment. It's funny. I back in I think it was 2011, I first got into.
Oh, that would have been cheap back then.
Yeah. Well, when I first bought crypto, I was freaking broke as. Automation agency had only kind of, that wasn't even a thing yet. And I was able to buy. I bought it at $948 for one Bitcoin. I bought 0.3 of a Bitcoin.
I'll give you $2,000 now.
Yeah, and I dropped down to $485, I think, the next day. And I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, this thing's the worst. And I just forgot about it. And then it was 2017, I think, is when we started to have the big, more public boom. And then, I haven't looked at what Bitcoin's worth today, but it's crazy. And even before that, I was mining Bitcoin. I mined Bitcoin and I managed to get about a cent, because it was only worth about 20 cents a Bitcoin back then. And so mining you could actually install on your own little computer back in the early days, and you could create this fancy internet money called Bitcoin. And I ran that on my computer for many months, and I made about 1 cent, and I decided it wasn't worth it. It's just so crazy, some of these things.
Have you heard about that guy in the UK that he threw out his desktop, and he's got like $200 million worth of Bitcoin, and I think his wife threw it into the tip, right? And now that he's asked the tip to he wants to excavate it, and they wouldn't let him. And now he said he's going to try and buy the tip. So he's got some backers to try and fund him to buy the tip, so he can just go looking for all this missing Bitcoin.
That's crazy. But it was easy done back then, because it was just so worthless. It was just a bit of software. You're like, oh, this is a cool idea, but it didn't go anywhere for so long.
Yeah.
But the people who stuck at it, like, kudos to them.
Yeah. Question number 3, Carl. What's been your most valuable investment advice you've ever received?
I would say the best advice is financial freedom equals passive income exceeding your expenses. And so you got 3 options to do that. You can increase your passive income, you can simplify your life and cut expenses, or you can do both. And that wisdom in particular of just going, okay, you want financial freedom, but here's what that actually looks like. Your passive income has to exceed your expenses. So you can either increase your income, cut your expenses, or you can do both at the same time. And that's how you get there. And that advice came from T. Harv Eker, if you're familiar with him. And following on from that, he actually, one of the best things that I learned from Harv as well was, if you can't manage the money that you currently have, why would God or the universe give you more? And that really stuck with me too. And so I implemented the system called the JARS system on my podcast. I actually break down how to do it, but it's also in Harv's book, Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. But like that JARS system, very similar to the Barefoot Investor, if you've looked at Barefoot Investor. But that system is how I still manage my money to date. And it was just, how do you manage your money even when you got a little bit, so that when you start making more, you can still manage that money. That was some of the best advice I ever got.
What are you doing to achieve that?
Yeah, it's always like passive income is always on my mind. So I look at passive income through business, and I think of income in 3 different ways. You've got active income, you've got leveraged income, and you've got passive income, right? And so I'll sometimes lump some leveraged income stuff into passive, but I know it's not truly passive. So leveraged income, you might be like, what the hell's that? That's an example of like you buy a house, you flip it, right? Like the money you made was not tied to the time you had to put in. Right. So active income, we all get that. You went and got a job, or you got your salary that you're working hard in your business for. Well, that's profits in your business. To me, that is a leveraged income source, right? You've got other people in your business doing the work. The money you're earning out of that is not directly tied to your hours going in. So anything like buying and selling shares, any kind of trading, to me, that's leveraged income. Even speaking, like if you actively go and speak and you get paid 10 grand for an hour's presentation, like, or you get paid per ticket for how many people come in the show, it's not directly tied to your time as to how much you actually earn. But then passive income is truly, hands off or a very low touch, maybe once or twice a year, you have to just tweak it and touch it. So property falls into that. Interest. People don't know this, but there are many cryptos that you can earn what they call staking, which is a bit like dividends from cryptocurrency. Really? So there's staking that you can do. Different. So you got proof of work, which is Bitcoin, but then you got proof of stake, which is things like Ethereum and Cardano and other cryptocurrencies. And so they pay off these dividends, if you like. So that's another form of passive income. But yeah, for me, I've got a mix of property, business, shares with dividends. Like I mix it all together.
That is the perfect lead into the next question. Carl, what's your ideal portfolio mix?
Exactly what I've got. So commercial property.
Yep.
For the strong cash flow, leverage, and capital growth. Like I know you and I have had this conversation. Like I don't think enough people in Australia really understand the power and benefit of commercial property. Crypto is speculation. Yes, I talked about you can do staking and stuff. I don't use it for that. To me, crypto is speculation. Even now, I said many years ago to some friends, I said, put 5 grand in. It'll either be worth 0 in 10 years time, and it'll be worth something crazy. Hopefully they took my advice because it'd be worth a decent amount. But I still believe that. Like, I think we're past the chance of crypto going to 0. I think that's long past us. But like, I can't tell you where it's going to land. So it's ultimately speculation. Then you got residential property in Australia in particular. That's for leverage and capital growth. Business for cash flow. Like if I know business, if you know business, like most businesses, if you run them well and you know what you're doing, every dollar you put in, you should be able to return at least 30% back on the dollars you put back into that business, right? Even if that's not direct from profit, you should be able to get that back. ETFs and LICs is a mix of cash flow and capital growth in the share market for me. And then cash sitting in offsets. Like I want cash for quick liquidity, but I put it in offset. So it's, guaranteed to just sit there and help lower some costs as well as deploy when I need it.
That's been the best answer I think I've had on this. So a lot of people have had just, property, but you've actually got a whole gamut of cards here. Now, my question to you is, do you look at the end of the year, do you try and do you have a goal? Do you say, okay, I want 30% in property and I want 50% in residential, 20% in shares, 10%, and rebalance it each year? Or are you just trying to, as you go along, think, there's a nice property, I'll buy that one or something like that? What's your strategy?
To me, to rebalance it, then you've got, especially with property, getting rid of property is a very expensive thing. Like there's a lot of costs when you sell a property. So I'm more of the approach that I'm not saying I'll never sell a property, but I'm more of the approach of I'm buying this, I'm planning to hold on to it potentially forever, because I know there's a lot of cost that's going to go in, unless there's a reason to get rid of it that strategically makes sense. Like I'm not looking to rebalance by selling. Right now we're sitting at about a third, not by design, but like we've got a third in liquid assets, we've got a third in property and a third in business. That's just where the portfolio happens to be sitting. That wasn't by design. I'm more just looking at how do I get to the next number. So like I track, if anyone's played the Robert Kiyosaki board game Cash Flow, like that cash flow statement that you use in the game many, many years ago, I copied that into a spreadsheet and I built that and I just run the cash flow game as my scorecard. I've now updated. I use a tool called Kubera for my net worth tracking. It's amazing. But like still the general cash flow thing. So every month I'm just updating that to see our position and I'm tracking like, do I have financial security? Do I have financial freedom? And if not, what's the gaps and where do we need to be? Do I have what I call financial abundance, where I've got 2 times my passive income? And so I'm always just looking at what's the next goal and what's the next investment to get us closer to that.
I think you're going to be all right, Carl. All right. Question number 5. How would you invest $20,000 as a 20-year-old?
Well, at 21, I actually had a bunch of money in shares, and I was about $8,000 at the time, and I actually cashed that out and I invested in a 3-day course to go to Las Vegas to Brad Sugar's Entrepreneurs Masterclass. And that was a trigger for me to go on my very first overseas trip. I'd never left the country. So I did a round the world trip. I went LA, Vegas, New York, London, Paris, Thailand, and then came home, all because of that trip. So I would be recommending to someone else who's at 20 years old, right?
Today, yep.
And that I would be going, okay, find some form of education in skills. And if possible, a way that you can get those skills and go and experience life and other cultures outside of your normal bubble in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then I'd say, and then the rest, whatever might be left, is put that into something like ETFs, set up an automatic investment every month that just buys more. In Australia, we've got this amazing product called Perla that, you know, you can set up. It's for boring long-term investing. It just automatically can invest. Like, there's some really cool things out there, but like, that's what I would tell someone. But I will say, like, that's what I would tell someone else's child. If I was talking to my own child, my daughter's 3. She already has more than 20 grand sitting in a fund. We invest into that every month for her. And my plan is that one day she will take over. And so by 20, I would assume that she would have learnt from my wife and I how to manage money and make that more money. So for her, it would just be about, you've got this fund, how do you turn it into more money? So that's kind of different. Like, if I was telling someone else's child versus my own child, I would have different advice.
When I was asked this question on a podcast, I said I'd advise my 20-year-old daughter to go and travel and live overseas for a year without having to hit up dad, because I think the skill sets that you'll learn from having to live out of a backpack and, you know, going to backpackers and stuff and living on that $20,000 you got will teach you life skills that will be invaluable as you get older. Question number 6, Carl. How would you invest $500,000 today? So say you know, there's going to be a big transfer of wealth from, you know, the baby boomers to someone of my generation. And if you didn't have any money, but you've just inherited $500,000, how would you tell someone to invest that $500,000 today? And this is not financial advice, obviously, Carl.
I would be looking to find a fairly low-touch business, maybe like a self-serve laundromat or something like that. Or even better if I could get the laundromat and own the commercial property that it's in as well.
Better.
Then I would look, because then later I could sell the business and still own the commercial property with a guaranteed tenant, right? Like, so that's what I would look at. I'd be going, can I get, and if anyone's going, can you get that for that price? Yes. Actually, just the other day, I was looking at exactly these things, automatic and self-serve laundromat. So that's what I would look for. I look for something that's fairly low touch business that would be mostly passive income. And I'd look for a real estate play as well if I could.
Why did you? Where was it, and why didn't you buy it?
Well, I've inquired in about 6, so I'm still.
Right. I see.
I'm still talking to the broker.
Plan. Right. Okay. I like it. All right. Question number 7. What would you tell your 20-year-old self about investing?
Buy more Bitcoin and don't sell it.
Exactly right. Oh, yeah. I missed that bandwagon. I've got to be honest with you, and I feel like it's too late. Like the horse is bolted. But yeah, I tend to agree with you.
If you've got some speculation money, like, I don't think you're too late, but I would only put it in. I've said this to people all the time, and I still believe it to be true. Anything you put into Bitcoin, it's got to be that you're okay losing it. Like if you're, and not just Bitcoin, just cryptos in general, but like, yeah, if you're going to put it in crypto, you've got to see it as this is some fun money. And if it goes amazing, it goes amazing. And when it crashes, and it will crash, like it loses huge amounts, but there are cycles, just like in the share market. There are regular cycles in crypto. Every time they say, oh, it might be different, and maybe it will be, who knows? But usually anytime people say this time's different, it always ends up being wrong anyway. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll just see. Like, for all we know, and especially with Trump, who's now in, like, he's very crypto friendly. It could be a very interesting next decade. But I like, outside of that, like, I think, just I wish I had, if I could go back, I wish I had invested more in crypto. Yeah.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to subscribe. And if you do, and you leave a comment, send me an email to tyron@washingtonbrown.com.au, and I'll send you a couple of my books for free.
Question number 8. What legacy do you want to leave your family or your community?
Some people are shocked when they hear this, but I want to ensure that my wife and daughter never have to work a day in their life, you know, whether I'm here or not. So that's ensuring that, you know, we have assets that spit off net cash flow. You know, some people, when they think of passive income, they're not taking all the costs, right? Like in property, they're not taking out the mortgage repayments, the interest and stuff. Like I'm talking about net cash flow, making sure the net cash flow covers all costs, right? And in an ideal world, we'd have a pool of assets that no matter how much they spend, they can't outspend the growth, right? Like we've got so much accumulated that no matter how much they're really spending to live life and enjoy life, that they just couldn't outspend it. So that's what I'd like to leave as a legacy for my family. I have, life insurances and stuff that help make sure that happens if I'm not around. But that's one of my things. And then for community, I'd really like to see more men in particular, dads, to step up in their role in the world. Like I believe right now we are in a very interesting time societally between the whole masculine, feminine, men and women, gender identity. There's a bunch of stuff. And so to me, I think men in particular, we live in a world that they're seen to be the bad guys. And I think the majority of the issues we face in the world are a result of poor leadership from men. That's not me saying that men are the bad guys. I think men are actually part of the solution. But if we can help more men truly lead with devotion with their wives and their kids and their communities, that will make a transformational shift in healthier kids, healthier society, healthier. So that's really important to me.
I normally do this at the end, but just on the Dadpreneur, do you want to talk about where people can reach out to get your help in that regard?
Yeah, look, if you're a dad and you run your own business, in particular, you're a more established business. If you're just in the startup phases, we may not be for you, but you're welcome to reach out. Dadpreneur.com. Very simple. You'll find us there. You can find us on social media. I think on Instagram, we're like Dadpreneur Official or Official Dadpreneur. I don't actually remember our handle, but it's something like that. If it says Official Dadpreneur, you're on the right one, but dadpreneur.com is the simplest. And yeah, especially if you're an Aussie-based dad who wants some help in balancing being a dad and a business owner at the same time, love to chat.
Fantastic. I just want to talk about something you said before. I actually listened to I know it's a little bit off a tangent here, but you talked about cash flow for your wife and daughter. And I heard you on a podcast today talk about your experience with a buyer's agency and how they didn't factor in CPI. And you've just said you want to leave enough wealth to not to work, but one of the factoring things they have to factor in is the fact of CPI. Do you want to run through your experience you had when you surveyed a lot of buyers agencies, didn't you? Didn't they all kind of have the same flawed methodology?
Yeah, well, over the years, I've spoken to a lot of, not just even financial advisors sometimes, like, a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, you put in this investment and we're going to have, like, the question that when you go and see a financial planner or a property strategist, anyone who's kind of like, I'm going to help you, how much money do you want to make? And usually the number that majority of people will say is I want 100 grand, right? Like that's the number they're aiming for. And so these property strategists, these financial advisors will often go, great, here's the plan to make 100 grand. And I experienced this. Like there was this property strategist, they were going to design a portfolio and I was, all right, let's go through this process. And they pitched me, here's how you're going to achieve your 100 grand. And then I'm like, okay, but so I'm going to have 100 grand in, I can't remember the timeline now, but it was how many years from now? Maybe it was 10 years. And I'm like, okay, but is that 100 grand in today's money or is 100 grand in 10 years time money? And they're like, oh no, today's money. I'm like, well, that's not 100 grand then. Like if I, and any sane person who says, how much money do you need to live? If they tell you today, here's how much they need, they're talking in today's dollars. They're not talking in future dollars. They're talking in today's dollars. This is how much I need to live.
Yes.
And so many of these people, because I guess it's more useful for them from a sales point of view. So that's the one side, is that they're nefariously doing it. On the other side is that they're just oblivious and don't actually understand inflation and CPI themselves. But like they're setting you up for failure, because you'll get 10 years down the line, you follow their plan, you've got your $10 million, your $100,000, and you're going, why can't I afford to live? Because they've either factored in you're going to earn a pension, which like I'm hoping I'll never even have to touch the pension. Like I'm not going to factor that in as guaranteed. It just seems crazy to me that these people do it. And not only that, in this particular situation, I'd said, I'm looking at wanting to buy like a $3 million commercial somewhere in this period. And he ended up setting me up to buy he's like, yeah, and it's like, I think it was like in 8 years time, you'll buy a $3 million commercial. And I ran some rough numbers. And I was like, in 3 years time, in 8 years time, that $3 million commercial is probably about the same as the 1 point something million commercial I could buy today. So why don't I just buy the 1 point something million dollar commercial today? Because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a $3 million commercial in today's money, right? Like I'm not like, it's just, it's wild.
Question number 9. Look, you've had a lot of businesses, sounds like very successful, but what does success look like to you, Carl?
Freedom to choose. to choose how I spend my time, who it's with, where I am, what I'm doing. I think that choice ultimately comes from not having to worry about financial security. I don't know if listeners or you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's very hard. We've got these basic survival needs that we need: air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, right? So that's the first thing. If you can get your financial circumstances set up that's taken care of, right? Like that starts to change a lot of things. Then you got safety needs. So personal safety, security, that can be having an emergency fund or something so that you start to feel. But once those kind of financial issues disappear, you can then actually focus on what I think is actually really the fun part of life. You learn about relationships. You can start investing in, like I've learned so much about relationships in the last 6 years, like self-introspection, attachment styles, things that I just would never have been able to properly explore when I was in that scarcity needing money. And so I think success is getting past that early stages of hierarchy of needs, that you can start getting truly on the path to what they call self-actualization. And then there's also transcendence, which Maslow's introduced later in his life, but that's about helping others achieve self-actualization, a very spiritual concept. So that to me is what success is, just being able to start to explore life outside of those early needs.
Fantastic. All right, the final question, Carl. I was just on your podcast recently, and we talked about this topic. I talked about how my father lost all his money and how it impacted me, which is why I started this podcast. And so question number 10, Warren Buffett said, rule number 1 is never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Carl, how do we not lose money?
My take on this is losing money is a mindset. It's a belief. It's a thought. And so I love Warren Buffett. It's a famous saying. I think there's a lot of wisdom. I know what he's pointing to. And I would also say it can also be really debilitating to some people to be like, I can't take action because I'm scared to lose money. So to me, if you can see what others might see as a financial loss, as you invested in a course, an education, and you've just learned something, like that changes the game. Like the number of courses that I have done, like that's in inverted commas for those listening, the courses I've done on, relationships. I had a relationship fail, and you could call that a failure, but no, that was a course in learning how to show up better in my next relationship. I've invested, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building software that I never ended up shipping, and I just gave up on that business. That was a course in learning. A $100,000 business 2 years ago that I invested in, that's been a course in doing your due diligence, not blindly trusting people. So I think I think of it as the way you don't lose money is that you make sure you find the lessons from the times that you do. Sure, look to find ways to minimize your risk. Like I actually prefer Bill Gates' approach, which is, he makes 5 big investments that will make a return of at least 25% or more. And he does that assuming that 4 of those investments are going to fail. So he's not going, how am I not going to lose money? Like he's doing it, he's managing it by making 5 big shot investments, expecting at least 4 will fail. And that as long as 1 goes, he'll be okay. Like 25% return means he doesn't lose money. And if the others go better, he's made money. Like that's the approach that I think is a better. And then the others are all lessons.
Carl, you've been one of my favorite guests today, I have to say, but I do have one secret final question that you didn't get because everyone gets these questions, so you can prepare, which is great, but there's one that I don't. Now, if you're a competitor of mine, I want you to switch off now because I'm going to ask a selfish question. So Turnal. So my bonus question, Carl, because I know you're quite IT savvy, what can I do at Washington Brown with AI? How can I, rather than just use ChatGPT on a day-to-day basis, which I do and I love, what are some of the things, or just 1 or 2, that I can implement at Washington Brown with AI to help my business grow?
Well, there's a couple of easy wins I think everyone can do. And since you're an automation agency client, Ty, the team could help you with some of these things. But adding an AI receptionist, forget voicemail. Voicemail is dead and gone. Also, in my opinion, so are those IVR systems, the phone systems where press 1 to do this, press 2. Set up an AI voice answering service. And that's actually quite easy to do. And so you set up the AI and it can talk to them and, hey, what's your query? And it can pass them on to another internal caller, or it can take a message, or it can send them a text message with a link to do something. They're still improving things to even be able to book appointments. That's still coming. But so an AI receptionist is a super easy thing that I think every business could easily implement. I think also if you're getting reviews on platforms, like Google reviews and things like that. If you haven't already automated that, putting out some sort of automated text messages that ask for those reviews. And then when someone leaves a review, you can use AI to actually write the replies to say, thanks so much for that. Analyze the sentiment to be alerted when there's a negative review, to be able to go, okay, we need to work on this. So there's some really simple, practical, I think every business can do. For your business in particular, or any business, 2025, we are in the age of AI agents. 2 years ago, I said to the team, hey, like there's some big stuff coming. And I didn't think it'd be here as quickly as it has. And it's an existential threat potentially to my business model. And so we're embracing it. We're going down AI agents as well as human people. And so I'd be looking at opportunities where, are there things you've got team members doing things that AI could initially augment? Like one of the things we do is every time a task is sent to our team, we used to have a human who would review that task and just, put some notes for the person who's going to do the work. Now AI does that. AI reads the task, writes the review notes, and leaves that for the hero who's going to do the work. Right. And the next step will be to actually, if any of those tasks can be done by an AI agent, it will do that, leave it internally for the hero, which will just save them time. So I would be looking at your process from as soon as people press order, any of those functions that people are manually doing. And if anyone hasn't played with it, maybe 12 more months is needed. But ChatGPT released a product called Operator. I've used it a few times. It's not quite there. Like it's not, but it's good enough. You've got existing, like Ty, I know your business. You've got existing software people click around in. AI can click those buttons now. You used to have to, before Operator came out, you had to ask a tool. You had to like programmatically give access to your systems. Now, Operator can, any button a human can do, if you just give it the same instructions you'd give an employee, hey, click this, when they want this, do this. Here's the process to issue a refund. Here's the process to put this order through. The AI can do the exact same thing. And so I'd just be looking for those opportunities where you can free up your smart, intelligent humans to work on the smart, intelligent things that the AI can't do.
I don't think I'll let my staff listen to this podcast because I think I just lost 25% of my staff. Carl, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the program. Thank you. Where can just to get one more time, where can people reach out to you? What's the best place to contact you?
I mean, we talked about a bunch of stuff. So you're best probably finding me. And I'm on Instagram. I'm Carl Taylor, CarlTaylor. Facebook, I'm Carl D. Taylor. And if you don't want to remember any of that, it's just carltaylor.com. You'll connect me there and all the businesses.
Thank you so much for your time, Carl. I've really enjoyed it.
10 with Ty is brought to you by Washington Brown, the property depreciation experts.